Okay, since we are a couple of minutes past the hour, why don't we get started? Um, Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on what, at least here in Ottawa, is a beautiful day. So we appreciate the sacrifice that involves. My name is William Van Geest. I am Executive Director at Ecology Ottawa. We have a full agenda today. We have an opening act and a main act. Of course, main act being Sophie Anderson, ecologist, Master of Science. So we're very eager for that. I'm just going to start with a few items off the bat. Of course, we want to acknowledge the fact that we are on um, colonized land in so many cases. Here in Ottawa, land that's been stewarded by the Algonquin and Anishinaabe since time immemorial. And it seems particularly fitting in light of Earth Day to remember the stewardship of Indigenous folks. I want to invite folks, in fact, to mention the land on which they're joining from this call. Just pop that in the chat if you'd like. Yeah, I'll just add that we at Ecology Ottawa recognize we're on a journey of truth and reconciliation, and we are committed to listening, learning, and working to decolonize our efforts toward healthy and sustainable environments for all people. So again, just invite folks to mention the land that they're joining from in the chat. So in terms of housekeeping items, folks will have noticed that we're recording the call. This is for posterity so that they can benefit from the information that is shared today. It feels like folks are getting quite good on the mute button. But if you are not already muted, I'd ask that you would, and we may exercise a little bit of prerogative there, muting folks if there's a lot of background noise coming through, just so everyone can hear clearly the speakers. Over the course of the presentations, particularly Sophie's, questions may come up. We want to encourage you to pop those in the chat, and we will get to them at the end. Je voulais aussi mentionner que la plupart de ce qui se passe aujourd'hui va se passer en anglais, mais si vous voulez, disons, poser des questions en français ou faire des commentaires, sentez-vous libre. Sophie est bien capable de prendre des questions en français et moi aussi, ça me ferait plaisir. And finally, before getting to our opener, I just wanted to take the opportunity to mention some news from Ecology Ottawa's front. That we have a new nature organizer, Philippa McDonald. I don't know, Philippa, if you can unmute and make a quick peep so your screen pops up for folks and they can say hi.
Hi there, my name's Philippa. Yes, I'm very excited to be the new nature organizer here at Ecology Ottawa.
Thanks, Philippa, and we are delighted to have Philippa joining us. Okay, so I am going to lead now into our opener, Deb Doherty. Deb is going to say a couple words just about bird protection in Ottawa and Bird Friendly Ottawa, who is a co-host of this webinar. Deb is the co-chair, actually, of Bird Friendly Ottawa. She's also a butterfly ranger, a member of the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club, particularly the Education and Publicity Committee. As a lifelong learner and educator for over 30 years, Deb enthusiastically discovers resources and activities and eagerly shares them with people of all generations. She's a birder, hiker, gardener, singer, grandmother of 4, and many other things. For the last 4 years, Deb has worked to have Ottawa certified as a bird-friendly city by building partners and relationships. She's got a whole whack of retirement projects that I won't go through now. But in short, she loves learning and loves helping others explore and conserve our natural environment. I'll now pass it over to Deb for a quick rundown of what's going on with Bird Friendly Ottawa.
Thanks very much for the intro, William. And I just wanted to say, on behalf of Bird Friendly Ottawa, we're delighted to be sharing hosting this webinar with our partner, Ecology Ottawa. We've been working together for the past 4 years, and it's been really, really great partnership.
Deb, I'll
So,
stop you quickly. It looks like your mode is not like full slide share mode.
oh, you're
Maybe
not
if you want to
getting
give that a
false.
shot again.
Yeah, I will give that a shot again. Sorry, thank
Great.
you.
Hmm. I see
You
a note from Don that my audio is weak. Is that true across the board? Are folks having trouble with my audio?
Is that full screen now?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, your
Okay.
audio's a bit quiet, William.
Okay, I'll try to make some adjustments while Deb is presenting. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Louisa. Back over to you, Deb.
Okay. So, as I was saying, we're very happy to be co-hosting this webinar with Ecology Ottawa, and William has just asked me to give you a little bit of a background behind Bird Friendly Ottawa and give you a bit of update on where we are. So, Bird Friendly Ottawa is part of a Nature Canada program that was initiated in 2019 because of the fact that North America has lost over 2.9 billion birds since 1970. And I'm sure many of you on the call are aware of these staggering statistics. And we really want to thank Nature Canada for all the research and support that they have given us over the years to help us understand these declines and how we can help save the birds. So we became Bird Friendly Cities as a program was launched in 2019 to address the rapid decline of bird population. It's a locally driven and nationally supported program. So as I mentioned, Nature Canada gives us lots of support in terms of resources, etc. And resource people like Sophie and Autumn and Ted, who are all going to talk to you shortly. As a bird team, Bird Friendly Ottawa started on this project in 2021. And we're one of 80 bird teams and 32 certified cities and towns. And we are hoping to be the 33rd or 34th city to be Bird Friendly certified. This is our team. It's a group of, we're an umbrella organization, which Ecology Ottawa hosts for us. We have a Bird Safe Campus at U Ottawa helping us. We have a number of committees from the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club, including Safe Wings, has brought a ton of experience to us because they've been around for about 25 years. And then partners like Wild Birds Unlimited, which is a nature shop that sells birds and gives walks and does webinars. So, and then other supporters who are not officially on our team. So we've been really blessed to have a large group of people helping us. So just in terms of the bird, what we've been doing and what makes you certified, and I'm sure Sophie's going to go into this in a little bit more detail, is there's sort of three pillars to the program. The first one is threat reduction and what municipalities are doing in terms of legislation and bylaws and policies, and then what community groups are doing in terms of education and helping municipalities implement those policies. So some of the things are window collisions and cats, which Sophie's going to deal with in more detail, but also things like dark sky lighting, pesticide use, single-use plastics, and vehicle collisions, which have been identified as the major threats to birds. Then also habitat restoration and climate resiliency. So reduce what are some of the programs that cities are actually implementing. So not just that they have a climate resiliency plan, but they actually have programs and active things that they are introducing to do those. And this is a list of some of the things that Ottawa is doing. We community action, and we first applied to be a bird friendly city in 2023. And although we didn't have municipal support, we sure hit it out of the park in terms of what our community is doing. It's a thriving, growing, passionately engaged community with Safe Wings doing annual displays of birds. You'll see there that's a book display. We're presenting in local libraries. The members of the Ottawa Field Naturalists out there on our important birding area, Lac de Chêne, with their scopes, and they've been working at this for literally over 100 years. And then the young people there during the pandemic at the University of Ottawa doing bird-friendly murals. So super active community and very welcoming in terms of all of the work they're doing. Some of our key successes have been the Ottawa Bird Strategy. So we actually worked with Nature Canada and Safe Wings Ottawa prior to becoming a bird-friendly team on actually creating a strategy. Unfortunately, it really kind of fell off, got hidden on the books because it was to be launched at the annual display in March 2020. So it's been a really good resource for us as the Bird Friendly Ottawa team, but it really isn't widely known. The City of Ottawa then implemented bird safe design guidelines in 2022. And then most recently, our mayor declared World Migratory Bird Day in May of 2025. So we actually got a mayoral proclamation, and there's a picture of us and our councillors reading out the proclamation. And then finally this February we got a city motion to support our application for Bird Friendly City. So we're very happy with where we're sitting right now. And if you want to learn more, there's the way you can contact us, Bird Friendly Ottawa. If you Google that, you'll find us on our website, on Instagram, and on Facebook. So I thank you for the time, William, and I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks very much, Deb. How is my audio now? Can I get a thumbs up or anything like that? Okay. Okay, I hope it's improved. If there are other problems, oh, great, thank you. Please let me know in the chat. I'm happy to keep trying to make adjustments. Okay, so we're going to go on now to our featured presentation, Sophie Anderson. Just before that, I am going to invite Ted Chesky, to just say a word about Nature Canada. Ted is Naturalist Director at Nature Canada. Briefly, he has a long history of fieldwork and research, both as a citizen scientist and as a conservation professional, where he studied the impact of urbanization on forest birds for the city of Waterloo in elsewhere in Ontario for 20 years. He's also authored or co-authored numerous publications and presentations related to bird conservation. Ted, over to you.
Hey, thank you, William, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I really looking forward to Sophie's presentation. It was such a pleasure to work with Sophie for the last several months on this project, and it's so great to meet a young person who's got so many good skills and communicates so well and such a brilliant mind. So I'm glad Sophie's doing this, and I'm also really grateful for the support we've got from Environment Climate Change Canada and the Canadian Wildlife Service. They are the funder for our Bird Friendly City program. And prior to that, Nature Canada, some of you may or may not know, just looking at the names on the call, I know that a few of you know this. We're working on some of the issues specific, particularly the really difficult ones that some of the municipalities have challenges dealing with, which are understandable. The cat issue, the issue of cat predation of birds being probably one of the trickiest ones. because their cats are also our beloved pets, and everyone comes from different cultures where the role of a cat in the society can be much different. But we do have certainly the science to kind of back up that that we can do things differently and do things better. So um, Nature Canada, just in case some of you don't know who we are, we're one of the oldest nature conservation organizations in the country. We're a national conservation charity. Our offices are in Ottawa. We're actually in the process of moving our offices to new digs on Laurier near Elgin. And we have a team of about 30 people. Our work is really focused on mobilizing the voices of Canadians on behalf of nature. Because, of course, for a lot of their decision makers, they don't hear that voice. So, and we look to the history of naturalist clubs, like the Ottawa Field Naturalist Club, like the Club des Ornithologues de l'Outaouais, as being able to represent that voice at the national level. And we know that the Ottawa Field Naturalist has been around a lot longer than we have. So we're very honored to be able to play that role and try to be a voice for you. Birds are international, they're global, they're our pulse on what's going on in the natural world. So it's very appropriate that we try to do this. And I think when we do it and we develop a conservation strategy around it, we're all winners, nature and humans. And I hope that most of you see that. And that's my I'll end my comments and turn it back over to you, William.
Thanks very much, Ted. Appreciate it. So, finally, what we've all been eager to hear, we're going to hear from Sophie Anderson. Quickly about Sophie. Sophie is an ecologist with over 7 years of work experience in the public, nonprofit, and academic sectors. She obtained her BSc in biology from the University of Ottawa and MSc in ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of Toronto. Today, Sophie is the Terrestrial Programs and Outreach Coordinator at the Invasive Species Center. In addition to her interest in a better understanding of how climate change is affecting the spread of invasive species, she is also passionate about avian conservation, which led her to become involved in this project in the first place. Sophie, we are delighted to have you here and very eager to hear what you have to say. Over to you.
Thank you, William. Let me just see if the sharing still works the same way it did last time. Alrighty, let's do full screen. There we go. Is everyone hear my audio okay? Just send a thumbs up. Hopefully it's not too kind of buggy. And the screen is visible okay?
That's great.
Perfect. I'm just going to minimize this so I can see my screen and not get distracted with everyone's faces. Here we go. Perfect. Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, William. As mentioned, my name is Sophie Anderson, and I'm really excited to be here with you all tonight. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your, busy schedules and evenings to come listen to my talk tonight on bird safety and urban environments. I also wanted to thank, obviously, our host, Ecology Ottawa, and William for organizing this. I'm very happy and grateful to be here and to talk to all of you tonight. I also wanted to acknowledge Nature Canada and Environment and Climate Change Canada, whose project this is, and I'm just a very small part of a large team, both at Nature Canada and at ECCC. So I am grateful that they allowed me to be their speaker tonight and to talk to you all. So as Deb mentioned in her introduction, this is not news to anyone. 1 in 4 birds have been lost since 1970. So this represents, as she mentioned, about 2.9 or 3 billion birds. So it's not nothing. Populations have experienced extreme changes since 1970. We can see here from the State of the Birds 2024 report that not all types of birds have been affected equally. Some actually appear to be doing all right or even thriving, like waterfowl or birds of prey. But there are many types of birds that are not doing well. So things like grassland birds, aerial insectivores, shorebirds, long-distance migrants, things like that have experienced extreme declines. And for the grassland birds in aerial insectivores, we might associate that with, the decline of insects, the increased use of pesticides. So big picture, things are not well for birds currently. So that's why this type of research is really important, to try to understand what kind of concrete actions we're doing together as a society, even at the municipal level, to really address bird declines. So I pulled this little graph here from Loss and Al's 2015 paper looking at direct mortality of birds from anthropogenic causes, just to kind of show what type of things are affecting bird mortality, both in US and Canada. And as we can see, both cats and building windows are kind of topping the list in terms of what's affecting bird populations and what's causing their decline. So we can see here for cats in Canada, cats are associated with approximately 204 million bird deaths per year, and building windows approximately 25 million. So these are really big causes of bird mortality and are especially pronounced in urban environments where we have, dense buildings, dense environments with glass, lots of cats. So these are important issues in urban environments. Now, obviously, there's many things that are affecting birds, even more so things like habitat loss and climate change. Those are obviously big factors, but those are a little bit more abstract and difficult to quantify in terms of a survey or research project looking at municipal policies and bylaws. So we decided to focus more so on things that are a bit more feasible to describe and ask questions about, which are cats and building windows. You may notice a lot of other things on this graph, including, automobile collisions, power lines. There's a million things that are really hurting birds right now, but we decided to focus on those that are the most prevalent and kind of have been causing the most destruction in our bird populations. So just a little bit of background on the project and what the goals are. So the overarching goals of this project were to really look at how birds are doing generally across the country and see what areas are prioritizing bird safety in urban environments. So the final product for this project was to really establish a ranking index for the 7 southern Canadian ecozones. And this ranking index would essentially tell us or give us a ranking per ecozone for bird-friendly architecture policies in place. Secondly, a ranking kind of regarding cat regulation for both owned and unowned cats. And then third, just an overall ranking generally, taking the average of those two per urban center. So the point of this was really to talk with cities, towns, municipalities. I'm just going to refer to all these under the umbrella term of urban centers going forward, so I don't have to say cities, towns, municipalities 50 million times. So we talked with urban centers all over the country, and we used our ranking of urban centers to get an average generalized ranking per ecozone to kind of tell us generally across the country, how are things doing, what kind of policies and bylaws are in place to help protect birds. So I mentioned we were talking about getting a generalized ranking per ecozone. So I just wanted to put here on the map, I'll put the map here of ecozones across Canada. And an ecozone is really like a large and generalized ecological unit that's classified by having similar abiotic and biotic factors. So for this project, we really focused on the 7 southern Canadian ecozones and neglected the northern ones. This was just because, because of time and efficiency's sake, we needed to focus on the areas where we had, more urban centers, where populations were denser. Denser populations, more urban centers, as I mentioned, would be kind of a proxy for having more buildings, more windows, and a higher domestic cat population. So we decided to focus on the 7 southern ecozones, including the Pacific Maritime, the Montane Cordelia, the prairies, boreal plain, boreal shield. Sorry, that little circle is supposed to be that entire peanut colored section, but alas, I could not get a specific shape. The Mixed Plain and the Atlantic Maritime. So those are the 7 ecozones that I'll be showing us results for at the end of this talk. So just keep that in mind when I'm talking about ecozones. This is what I'm referring to. Now, as a result of this project, we were able to talk with and get a completed survey from 125 urban centers all across the country. And these urban centers were contacted either by phone or email. I threw together this map pretty quickly just because sometimes when you think about 125, it's hard to visualize that. So I really just wanted to have some kind of visual representation to show, where were all these urban centers we were talking about? Where are they situated? How are they grouped? So we can really get an idea of what I'm talking about. So here they are. Here they are all 125 on the map. So this section, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about our ranking system because this really determined how a municipality is ranked, and then based on the municipality, how our eco zones were ranked from that data. So I think it's really important to kind of talk about this and understand how the ranking system was created and what it means. In terms of our project, we sent out a questionnaire, and the questionnaire, as I mentioned, was talking about asking questions about on Section 1, bird-friendly architecture policies in place, and Section 2 on cats, both owned and unowned cat regulations. So that was kind of our two sections, and our two ranking criterias were based on these topics. So first of all, so I'm just going to minimize this so I can see. There we go. The first topic was bird-friendly architecture. And to establish our ranking of bird-friendly architecture, we actually had 3 equally rated criteria. So the first criteria was essentially, do you have any bird-friendly, bird-safe design guidelines or standards in place in your town? And this would allow us to rank them on a scale of poor to fair, poor to very good, with poor being 1, fair being 2, good being a 3, and very good being a 4. So we wanted to have a qualitative as well as a quantitative ranking scale because it's a lot easier to just say this is a 1 rather than this is a poor. So poor is equal to 1, very good is equal to 4. You can see the pattern. For our second criteria, we were looking at education. So this means education surrounding bird window collisions, how birds are being killed by windows, education around the policy if there is any. So all municipal or community-led education is addressed in this section. And then the third criteria is looking at kind of other initiatives. So things like if the town, it might not have necessarily a policy in place for new construction, but maybe they have retrofitting on older buildings to kind of address that. So putting window decals on municipal buildings or buildings that are already established instead of having a policy for new construction. That's always a possibility. They might have a tracking system to track treated windows, or they might have a system in place to track window collisions. So what type of bird hit what window? Where did they hit? Anything like that. So we wanted to be fairly open with our criteria and allow municipalities to get points, even if they didn't necessarily have a bird-friendly building design policy in place. So I just want to go through the ranking system a little more in depth. So for our first criteria, bird-friendly building design, if a urban center was to have no policy in place, well, then they would be ranked as a 1 for that criteria. If they have some kind of guideline in place that's maybe not actively promoted, but there's an example of a library or something that has been implemented, that would be a fair or a 2. If that municipality has something like they have mandatory standards in place, but those standards only apply to certain types of new constructed buildings, well, that would be good. And then very good, or the best they could get, would be if they had some kind of building standard in place that applies to all new construction types. So that's for our bird-friendly design policy category. For the education, it's very similar. They'd score a poor or a 1 if they had no municipal-led or community-led education. It would be a 2 or fair if they maybe had some information on the city website that was updated quite a long time ago and no kind of real active awareness campaign or a limited work on this. Good would be if they had a lot of information on the website and they had an awareness campaign within the last year with the intention to keep going. And then very good would mean they have information on the website that's accurate and up to date. They're engaged with community partners and have had awareness campaigns consecutively over the last 2 years in multiple formats, be that social media, installations, public demonstrations, events, anything like that. So it just shows that it's something that's being taken seriously and intends to be continued to be taken seriously in the future. And for our last criteria, the other initiatives, it's also very similar in that if you don't have any other types of initiative going on, you'd be classified as 1 or poor. Fair would be 1 of the 3, good would be 2 of the 3, and then very good would be doing all these extra initiatives. And the way this would work is that I'll give an example. Say, for instance, our hypothetical municipality has no bird-friendly design guideline in place. They'd have a 1 here. If they maybe had a little bit of education in place, a little bit of information on the city website, they'd have a 2 for education. And if they had no other initiatives, to be 1. And you take the average of that overall, which would be, I think, like a 1.3, which you'd round back down to a 1. So that municipality would get an overall score of 1 for the bird-friendly architectural category. Now, it's very similar for the cat stuff. I'm not going to go into as much detail because it's the same ranking criteria from poor to very good or 1 to 4. And again, we have 3 criteria to get an average for this ranking. So the first would be presence of a no-roam bylaw. Now, just to give an overall overview of what a no-roam bylaw is, that essentially is a bylaw that's put in place that kind of forbids or discourages, well, I guess forbids actually is the more proper term, cats from being at large or leaving their owner's property. So essentially, cats need to be restricted to their owner's property and can't just be running about in the town. So that's what a no-roam bylaw is. And our first criteria is assessing whether a community has that in place. So they would have a 1 or a poor ranking if there was no policy in place. They'd be fair or have a 2 if they maybe didn't have the policy but had some education surrounding this issue. They'd be good if they have the bylaw that's implemented and a little bit of information on the bylaw on their website. And they'd be very good if they had the bylaw and education. Now, I just wanted to emphasize that communities that had the bylaw in place already got, a 3. They're doing pretty well because we wanted to highlight the fact that, as Deb was mentioning, like this is a fairly contentious issue. It's quite controversial number of small communities where, we all love our pets, we love our cats. So even managing to get that kind of bylaw passed and implemented is already quite a win. And the education would be kind of the easier component. So even if they have the bylaw but no education, they could easily get education going. But I just wanted to mention that that was kind of why we put that so high on the scale, was that we realized that it's something that's not necessarily an easy task to accomplish. Same thing for cat education. It's very similar to the other grid that I mentioned about education. If they have no education, it'd be poor. If they have a lot of education and partnerships with community partners and are committed to kind of continuing that initiative, they'd be very good. And our last category is related to unowned cats. So this would be things like if they have trap, neuter, release programs in their communities, if they have things like tracking or monitoring feral colonies of cats, if they maybe sometimes relocate feral colonies to less biodiverse areas. Any other initiatives surrounding unknown cats would fall under this ranking scale. So again, they'd be poor or a 1 if they had none of these programs in place, and they'd be very good if they had, a municipal strategy that has actually shown some data and that it's showing declining numbers of outdoor cat populations, and they have like a very well-resourced and adequately resourced TNR program. So that's kind of an overview of how we established our ranking systems to get an overall ranking per municipality on these 2 issues. So just briefly on the methodology, I'm not going to dive too much into the details here, but I just wanted to give a little overall view of how this project was accomplished. So first off, we'd initiate contact with the urban centers sequentially. A statistician, Adam Smith at Environment and Climate Change Canada, actually provided us with a list of municipalities to sample. Obviously, this wasn't every single one in Canada. We had a list of, I think, of 162 that we would try to contact based on a weighted sampling strategy. So this doesn't represent everybody in Canada. We didn't necessarily get to sample all the bird-friendly cities, but this was a specially designed sampling strategy to take into account both the time and efficiency of sampling. So we would initiate contact with our urban centers following the list, and we would ask the contact person, and this would sometimes be multiple contact persons depending on the municipality. Usually we'd chat with someone either like the city clerk, someone in bylaw, or someone in planning and development to get answers to some of our questions on the questionnaire. And depending on the municipality, this would often be 1 or many people. And we'd ask the contact person to complete the questionnaire. Obviously, we'd first try to call them, but you know how it is nowadays. It's sometimes hard to get a hold of people by phone. So oftentimes email would be the easiest. Also, that gives the person time to kind of look through the questionnaire, and it is quite a long, in-depth survey, and not necessarily all answers would be immediately obvious. They may have to do some digging in the bylaws or ask another department. So that usually seems to be the most efficient, would be to kind of get someone to answer the survey by email and take their time verifying the information before submitting it. And then finally, we would use the information submitted in our survey to rank the urban center using the kind of criteria grid I explained in depth just a couple minutes ago. So now I'd like to welcome a little bit of discussion in the chat, just to keep it interactive and not me, talking nonstop for 40 minutes. So before I get into the results, I was just really wanting to ask people what your preconceptions were. So I went into this with a few kind of ideas of what I thought the results would be, and I was a little bit surprised. So I was wondering what you think the percent of urban centers that had some kind of bird-friendly architecture policy in place would be. Like, do you think it would be 5% of urban centers sampled, 20, 50, 80? Like, I'm just curious what your thoughts would be in terms of what our percent of the population might be. Let's see. Okay, so we have 6%, okay, 10%, 10%, less than 5, 20, 30. So we have like a wide 12.5. That's very specific. I appreciate that. 15. Okay, so we're getting some good answers. A wide array. No one's being optimistic and saying 80%. No? You're probably right with that. Okay, so I'd say you're all actually in the right ballpark. If I can move on to the next slide. So it turns out, following our sampling, approximately 16%. So the person who said 15 was very close. 16% of all 125 centers sampled had some kind of bird-friendly architecture policy in place. So we broke this down a little bit into guidelines versus standards. So I may have mentioned, but guidelines are things that are kind of not mandatory. Their guidelines or the recommendations. So 16 of the 125 centers sampled had some form of guideline in place, which is great. And then about 3% or 4 of the 125 centers had kind of standards, which would be requirements for bird-friendly architectural policies. So I'd say 16%, like it's not bad. It's more than I expected going into it, honestly. So I think it's not a bad place to start. And this already shows that there is interest in bird-friendly architectural policies. And I can't help but think it might continue to grow from here. So that was just kind of an interesting finding that 16% of the 125 centers we sample have some kind of policy in place. And again, I wanted to mention, we didn't have the time or the means to reach out to everybody in Canada. So perhaps this number would change if we had the time to really kind of increase that number to a higher extent and a more representative sample of the country. Same thing, another question for you guys in the audience related to the cats now. In your opinion, what percent of urban centers sampled had a no roam bylaw in place? I was also very surprised by this following the analysis to see just how many had a no roam bylaw. So I'm not going to say any more because I might spoil it, but I'd just be curious to see what your thoughts would be on that. 10%, 10%. Okay, so people are thinking pretty low. 75%, 50%. Okay, a lot of variety. 8%. Okay, so we're quite divided on this one, and that's totally fair because I was also very surprised by the results. I also expected it to be quite low, but in fact, my gosh, it's not like, there we go. The no roam bylaws represented approximately 58% of the 125 centers sampled. So I was really surprised by this. I did not expect it to be that high. I do have to mention a little caveat that this simply represents the number of no roam bylaws that are, implemented, but doesn't necessarily represent how they're enforced or if they're enforced, or the education surrounding it or awareness in the community. So for example, there's many ways of enforcing bylaw. We found the most common method for the no roam bylaw would be complaint-based because obviously, as you may think, not a lot of municipalities have the time, resources, or energy to be able to be out in the street, patrolling for cats. Like it's just not as feasible as it used to be perhaps in smaller towns. So now it's mostly a complaint-based mechanism. And for it to be complaint-based, there has to be, people have to be aware of it, have to be aware that they can complain about it. So those kind of go hand in hand regarding enforcement and education. So I just want to say this is a very large number and that's very positive, and it's great that we have these bylaws in place because, as I mentioned, implementing a bylaw itself is already a big step and already kind of most of the work. But I did just want to mention, like, if the enforcement surrounding this isn't adequate or if the education in the community, we aren't aware of it, those are things to also take into consideration. So my last question for you all, just to keep you all on your toes, I did mention in our bird-friendly architecture section of the survey, one of the questions we asked was kind of like, what are the main challenges that your municipality is facing with regard to implementation uptake of these policies? obviously bird friendly architecture related. So we asked a lot of these municipalities what are their thoughts, especially if they don't have policies, why not? Like, what is the challenge or the difficulty with regard to implementing these policies? So I have a few things on the next slide to bring up, but I was just curious if anyone had any ideas of possible answers from municipalities, like why wouldn't they have bird-friendly architecture policies in place, or what would be kind of a possible impediment to their implementation? Just see if anyone has ideas. I know that's a bit more to think about. Provincial legislation, yes. Cost of development, councillor bias. Federal government reluctance, cost, yes. Those are all really good answers. Funding, There's a few that I haven't quite seen yet. Cost to build, shift in political landscape, yes. Retrofitting, Pushback from private owners, people are awareness. That's a very big one. People aren't necessarily going out of their way to not think about birds. Just sometimes it just doesn't come up or it's not considered a priority. Size of municipality for enforcement, that's great. Lack of awareness, developers, urban and rural mix in municipality. Yeah, that's very true. There'll be a few ones that you might all find surprising that I'll highlight that I think were actually really great chances for awareness and education, because I obviously coming into this project wasn't aware of certain things. So having that perspective of, people aren't necessarily going out of their way to like not be friendly towards birds. There's just simply lack of awareness in certain areas. People don't understand why it's a problem. Exactly. That's the big one. Not seen as a priority. Okay, perfect. Well, I made a little infographic that is kind of supposed to look like a bird here. I hope you can all see that and appreciate that. Little eyes here and stuff. So this infographic is really just kind of highlighting some of the most common responses we received. And these first two are what I wanted to talk on a little bit. So this was kind of a common response in both the survey, but also when I had the chance to chat with people through email or on the phone. This was a common response, is that a lot of the smaller communities we chatted with, they would say, well, hey, I'm a small community. We don't have any skyscrapers. We don't have any tall buildings. We don't have any buildings over like 3 or 4 stories. So this was a really big reoccurring theme, was that folks were like, it's not a problem for us. Like we're a small municipality in the forest. Like, we don't have that many bird window collisions. We don't have any skyscrapers. So that was a reoccurring theme that I thought was very interesting, because honestly, it's not well known that actually less than 1% of all bird window collisions occur in high-story buildings or condos. Actually, 99% is residential buildings or low-rise buildings. So this is not common knowledge. And to be honest, I didn't know this before becoming involved in this project. So that was really a great opportunity to kind of chat with some of these folks. And when we sent a follow-up email to thank them for their participation, we made note to include a bunch of resources and information they can access about this issue, just kind of dispelling some common misconceptions, because how are they supposed to know if they haven't had any awareness? So that was a big thing I wanted to mention, was that this was kind of a reoccurring theme. As you all mentioned in the chat, they are also perceived as an impediment to construction in a lot of cases. That's another common misconception, because they're not that much of an impediment to construction, especially if you look at things like cost. I was looking at a FLAP Canada study today, actually, just to kind of be able to tell you guys, but it was saying how low-rise buildings, if, for instance, you have to glaze 100% of the windows, that would only result in approximately a 5 to 10% increase in the window contract. However, if you're looking at something like a 40-story condo, you'd really only have to glaze 10% of the windows, and that would result in approximately only a 1% increase in the window budget. So these aren't things that are like life-changing or that deep in terms of the construction. So that was also another fact that I was trying to make spread awareness about. But you're right that the lack of awareness is really the biggest thing that came up. Like, this just simply wasn't something people thought about, wasn't something they're aware about, hadn't been addressed. So that was one of the biggest reoccurring themes. Another thing that came up was staff capacity. If you talk to a lot of folks in small communities, you often have one person who's doing the job of clerk, CIO, treasurer, planning and development. Like, they sometimes just don't have the necessary capacity or resources to be able to address the question. Cost came up a lot of the times, which would be associated with the impediment to construction side of things. And policy delays was another common answer. Policy delays in that people would say, it takes a long time to get anything passed around here, especially things that are not super high priority. So just the fact that things take a long time was another answer. But you did bring up a good point about the conflicting policies with like, provincial governments. And that didn't come up as much, but I have a feeling it might just be because people, weren't necessarily comfortable talking about that or, you know, telling us that. So I think that might have been probably an underrepresented answer that just didn't get fully fully elucidated in this study. So one of the take-home messages we tried to make pretty clear and hammer home was just the fact that like this isn't just a problem for big cities. Small towns, communities, and urban centers can all do their part, can all participate, can all help because 1% of window collisions are high rise, but the other 99% are low rise and residential buildings. So it's really a problem that affects all urban centers, regardless if you're a small community or a large city. So this was just something I felt like was important to mention. Now, finally getting to some of the results, the juiciness of this research, I wanted to share the rankings that we came up per ecozone. Now, the municipality level stuff, all those questions I'm not going to share today just because we're still kind of figuring out data distribution and privacy rights and all that. But I did want to show like their average ranking per ecozones that we came up with. So to explain this table, we have our ecozones here on the far left, all 7 of them that we examined. We have the number of community samples, that's our N number. And then we have a bunch of columns here, which I'll take a minute to explain because it's not necessarily super intuitive. This column here that says average ranking bird friendly architecture, so our first kind of light blue column, that was the result of using an equation in Excel to generate the average. And you can see it's not necessarily kind of clean. It's 1.1s, 1.3s, which we then had to average out to either 1s, 1.5s, kind of round up or down. So same thing for the cats. Regulations here, rounded cat average. And then finally, the average ranking overall was the average of the bird friendly architecture section and the cat section, just to give us kind of a total overall ranking. And we can see here that the mixedwood plain and the prairies are actually our highest with a score of 2 or fair. And we can see that the boreal shield is next, best at a 1.5. So these are some interesting results. I did want to mention that, a lot of the times to get a higher average ranking for cats, municipalities would just really need to have some kind of bylaw in effect. So even if they're not very strong for a bird-friendly architectural section, if they have strong bylaws or strong education around cats, that would naturally boost their ranking score. And I also wanted to mention, you might think like, oh, it's a little bit low. Why are they so low? Like, wouldn't the bird-friendly cities bring them up? And that is very true. The bird-friendly cities did do much better. But if you think about it, out of all the 125 urban centers sampled, I think there's only approximately 14 bird-friendly cities that we collected data from. So in the end, even if they are doing a lot better, they simply just get averaged out compared to a lot of the smaller municipalities and cities that don't necessarily have as high priority for bird-friendly architecture or cat regulation. I also helped this little table ranking per province. Now, again, I just want to caveat this by saying that the sampling strategy was actually established for the ecozones. So that's why you can see here per province, it's only like, 1 for Newfoundland and Labrador, 1 for Prince Edward Island. So I wouldn't necessarily say this is super representative for the provinces since the sampling strategy was designed with ecozones in mind. But I thought it would still be interesting to share just to see the average overall ranking and chat a little bit about this. So we can see here that Ontario here is doing the best and that a lot of the other provinces are kind of tied with 1.5s. And there's a few down here, so Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and British Columbia with 1s. But that also being said, like the sampling size for some of our Atlantic Maritime provinces weren't necessarily that high. And this brings up kind of another question I was hinting at earlier is, how are the bird-friendly cities doing compared to non-bird-friendly cities and towns? Is there a major difference in the ranking? And I can happily say that, yes, there is. So shout out to all of our bird-friendly teams. You guys are doing great work. It's really paying off. This is some data to show that right here. So I just really wanted to commend you all on your great work and just let you know that it does seem to be making a significant difference. So we see our bird-friendly cities have an average ranking of 2.5, which is somewhere between fair and good, both for bird-friendly architecture policies and owned and unowned cat regulations, which gives us an overall average of 2.5 again. And if we're looking at our non-bird friendly cities, we see they have an average ranking of approximately 1 for bird friendly architectural policies, 1.5 for cats, bringing us, I rounded down to approximately a 1 for non-bird friendly cities. But as I mentioned, for our bird friendly cities, we in the sampling strategy, we had 14 we needed to sample. And as Deb mentioned, obviously, there are many more that are still in place in Canada. So this difference between bird-friendly cities and non-bird-friendly cities, I'm confident would only be more distinct, more exacerbated if we sampled more of our bird-friendly cities. So positive news, bird-friendly cities are doing great. I just wanted to address a few limitations of the project. Even though I think it was a great success and it was very positive, there's a few things that, I should maybe address. A lot of them are little kind of more methodology details, things like perhaps it was a little bit difficult to have a standard contact person for each urban center. As I mentioned before, sometimes it involves talking with multiple people in the same urban center. If you talk to the clerk, you might also have to talk to the bylaw and planning to really get a full picture and be able to answer all the questions on the survey. So this just means that it was like a little bit different for each municipality in terms of kind of the quality of the data or the knowledge of the person you're talking to or the interest of the person you're talking to. So perhaps it would be best next time to have like one standard person. But again, that's difficult because they might not know everything. So that was something I was like, maybe we should think about this a little bit more. The questionnaire length, it was a little long, but I think that was also very positive, as I'll mention on the next slide, in that we were able to really get a kind of deep dive into each municipality. It wasn't just a simple black or white. It was, okay, we have some gray here. We're able to see, how they're doing for bird-friendly architecture policies and cat bylaws, but we also have a section where they can highlight other initiatives they have in place. Like even if they don't have these two things, if they have other things they are proud of or wanted to mention, that's great to know as well. Some municipalities, didn't necessarily have any bird-friendly architecture policies or bylaws in place, but they have an extremely aware community because they're on a flight or migratory path line and they have an annual brant festival, for instance. So I think it was very important to have also a section in the questionnaire where folks could kind of list other things that they're doing to help birds. So it's not just all focused on these two issues. The questionnaire was also, I think, I don't remember how many exactly, but approximately 28 questions. So we got details that were not necessarily relevant for the ranking, but could be used for research down the line or other types of initiatives. So we really got a lot of great information, but maybe the questionnaire length was perhaps a little bit intimidating to some if they're trying to fill it out on their own. And then the ranking systems. We thought long and hard about the ranking system and how to make it the most appropriate it could be. And we decided in the end to include the half points because we found that if something was ranked, if an urban center is ranked a 1 or a 2, there are sometimes urban centers that were like not quite poor enough to be a 1, but not quite good enough to be a 2, and they'd fall in that kind of gray zone of 1.5. So we did decide that keeping the 1.5s was valuable and provided kind of some value to our ranking criteria overall. And finally, all ranking criteria would be subjective depending on who decides what it is. If this is equal to a 1, this is equal to a 2. So there's obviously always some potential limitations of your ranking criteria, but this could always lead to next steps down the road. For instance, if someone would like to look more so into the effects of pesticides on bird health and looking at pesticide regulations. So we could always continue to add more factors into this. But for this project, I think we were really focusing just on bird-friendly architectural policies and cat bylaws. And just quickly chatting a little bit about some of the advantages and wins of the project. It was really a great chance to chat with municipal officials all over Canada to really spread awareness and solicit thoughts concerning bird conservation, actions to conserve birds, and many other things. It was really great to be able to spread that awareness and chat with people because people often would be quite interested in talking with someone on bird conservation because it's not necessarily a topic that comes up every day in their office. And they'd always have, plenty of anecdotes, home anecdotes or town anecdotes or thoughts or concerns. So that was always very interesting. And many communities were also very interested in the results of the study. I had quite a number of people that requested additional information or resources to be sent over. One municipality asked for us to kind of send them a list of things they could post on their social media to spread awareness about both bird window collisions and cat predation of birds. So that was really quite compelling. And another thing was that we were able to make connections between people in the same community. So for instance, as Deb was mentioning, there's bird teams all over the country, but sometimes municipal officials wouldn't even be aware that these bird teams exist or what they're doing. So it's always great to be able to like kind of remind them like, oh, hey, there's this team doing this in your community. It'd be great to, touch base with them about this. And as I mentioned, we were able to do a deep dive for each community due to the length and number of questions in the questionnaire. So we were really able to collect a lot of data on each municipality, which could serve us well in the future. And finally, we were able to create an established database of contacts for 125 urban centers across Canada and spread awareness of this issue that people might not have been aware of before. So having this database of contacts would be great if we, decide to pursue the research in the future or initiate other research projects. It's always great to have contacts at these different centers and people that are already aware of, bird conservation and declining bird populations. And I just wanted to wrap up because I saw this recently and I thought this was really, really so interesting. Just briefly about international initiatives for bird-friendly cities that we can see internationally. I said internationally twice. My brain's getting a little tired. So one thing I noticed in the news recently was that in Scotland, they passed mandatory swift bricks that have to be implemented in all new construction types to help save the endangered swifts. So as you can see here, a swift brick is just like a little brick with a hole that the swifts can use to nest in. And I thought that was really quite neat and just like an amazing initiative by Scotland that could be potentially looked at over here as well. So just to wrap up on this, I want to acknowledge, obviously, all the participating municipalities. We only have one of which who is present tonight. So thank you, Bird Friendly Ottawa team, for helping out with this research. Obviously, also Nature Canada and Environment and Climate Change Canada, who both led and funded this project. And as I mentioned, I was just a small component of a very large team. So I wanted to thank all of them for their, support, help, and guidance with this research. And with that, I will wrap up and say thank you. I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Ted, who is here, might also be able to answer some questions if they're out of my depth or above my scope. So we're lucky to have him here today from Nature Canada. And I just wanted to say thank you to all so much for being here tonight and taking the time out of your busy lives to come listen about birds. And we're really excited about this research and all the possible ways it could be used in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. That was not only very informative, but very lucid. Very clear presentation. Thanks so much. Okay, why don't we head into question period? As I mentioned earlier and in the chat, please feel free to add questions to the chat, but if you prefer speaking your question, please use the raise hand function. You can find that if you scroll with your mouse to the bottom of the screen. There's a react button, and if you click on it, there's a little button that says raise hand. So there were a couple questions in the chat already, and maybe I'll just read them off. And so if you can respond to them if you wish, or call a friend, in this case Ted. First question was, how are the stats regarding cat and bird collision deaths determined? I did see that Ted popped a study in the chat in response to that, but I just wondering, Sophie, if you wanted to add anything to that question or to that answer.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And yeah, thanks, Ted, for popping that in the chat because obviously there's many research initiatives going on surrounding this subject. So I pulled my specific data from a 2015 study, but there's probably a few more recent things. Like Ted put the link here to Jonathan Chu and Elizabeth Gow's study, and that kind of revised some of the estimates that maybe were over-exaggerated beforehand. So that has been changed for the cats. So perhaps I'll use a more updated figure next time, but studies like that are where we get some of our information.
Thanks, Sophie. I see a hand up. Maybe we'll just kind of alternate between chat and hand as long as there are folks in each of those queues. Willow, over to you for a question.
Hi there. I was wondering, first, thank you so much for the talk. It was great. I was wondering if you heard anything, feedback from municipalities, because I know when I've talked to municipalities, a number of them said that they thought that it was best addressed at the provincial or federal level. Is that something you heard much about? And did you hear anything about some of the reasoning behind that, if you did hear that?
Hi, Willow. Yeah, great question. I was actually surprised because I expected there to be a little bit more discussion about provincial legislation or people to kind of mention that as a reason why they hadn't necessarily implemented bird-friendly architecture. But surprisingly, that wasn't one of the things that came up most often. As I mentioned, it was mostly like a lack of awareness or just if they're a smaller municipality being like, well, it's not a problem here. So I was surprised that that wasn't necessarily as much of a topic of conversation. It was more so something that we chatted about with the bird friendly city teams, probably because they're more in the loop and more kind of aware of the issue. But yeah, for the most part, it wasn't something that really came up, which was kind of surprising to me.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Willow, for the question. Another question that came up earlier in the chat. Um, so Nathan asks, how do you see Bill 17 or Bill 98, in parentheses, provincial legislation that takes away municipalities' ability to ensure bird-safe designs and other sustainable design? How do you see this legislation affecting these rankings in Ontario in the future? And do you think developers will still comply with these kinds of designs because of best practice, or will they forego it altogether, given it is no longer required? I
Yeah,
can
Nathan,
repeat
that's
portions of that if that's
yeah.
helpful.
I have it up on my screen because I was scrolling through the chat. Just sometimes I like reading the questions before. Um, yeah, so I might loop Ted in on this one a little bit because I'm a little bit less familiar with the policy, having just kind of joined the world of bird conservation. So I can say a little bit on my opinion, then I can maybe throw it over to Ted if that sounds good. Um, yeah, so as I mentioned to Willa's question, people weren't necessarily talking about that as much in their answers, but I do see that as significantly affecting the rankings in Ontario in the future. That was kind of one of the reasons I was surprised that Ontario was doing so well at the moment. I know cities like Toronto are really fighting back at the moment to try to have that independence to implement their own green policies, but I do think if this trend continues, we unfortunately may see that reflected in the ranking and a decrease associated, particularly with the bird friendly architecture side of things. The cat bylaws, I don't necessarily see being as affected, but definitely the bird friendly architecture policies, if this continues, might experience a dip. I can throw it over to Ted for his thoughts if that sounds good.
Sure, great answer, Sophie. I would, yeah, for sure. I think there's to be a decision maker in municipalities, probably one of the hardest things to do in the world is because there's so many competing interests, and right now there's housing crisis and all of the other economic issues. So it's not an easy life, and I don't envy any politician, no matter what their stripes are. There's a lot of tension, and I don't want to make apologies for anyone, but I think the market, and it kind of comes down to education. If we need to convince the world and our people and our communities that these issues are important, and if people believe that, then they will demand it in the places that they choose to live in. So I do believe that having a voice and mobilizing that voice is really, really critical to keeping things like architectural standards in place. And governments come and go, and over time policies go back and forth. But if people take these things on as a value, a community value, then I think that's much more resistant to this sort of short-term changes that are driven by economics and so on. So I have hope in that. It's one of the reasons we like to, that you guys say that Ecology Ottawa exists, and the Field Naturalist Club conservation folks do this work, and we just need to convince more people that these things are important.
Thanks, both. Um, Just saying, I think this is a follow-up to that. Nathan mentions, thanks. I'm coming at this as a planner, and the mood in the profession in Ontario is bleak, given how much control has been taken away from municipalities. I'm hoping for a pushback from grassroots orgs, you are on notice, and invested city staff too. City staff also on notice. I think Eileen's point just prior to that is probably on the same topic. It's difficult to get changes to the provincial building code for even changes related to human safety. Okay, so another question that popped up in the chat earlier was just about the glaze. Well, I'll just read the question. Why would you only have to glaze 40% of windows in a condo? I think Sophie, you mentioned something to this effect earlier. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure thing. I also noticed Ted had responded there. And what I was talking about was just the fact that not all like stories are weighted equally. As we mentioned, like the above 4 stories doesn't usually cause significant bird mortality. So that's why I was saying, like, if they really wanted to make a difference, they'd only have to glaze the bottom 4 to 5 floors. That's why I mentioned the 40% of like a 40 floor condo, something like that. So that's where the 1% figure came from.
Great, thank you. That was quite convincing from an economic standpoint. Um, John, I think on pretty similar lines, asked, we don't understand which buildings or windows are most at risk. Is there data or guidelines to help?
Yeah, so there's lots of data and guidelines available. I think the city of Ottawa might even have its own specific guidelines. Maybe Deb or Ted could speak more to that. I'm not exactly an expert in that area. So yeah, Ted, you can totally go ahead.
Sure. There's a national organization called the Fatal Light Awareness Program, or FLAP. Um, Canada, FLAP Canada. Just make a note of that. I'll put something down in there. But they actually have developed a methodology to assess the lethality of a building and its facades. So it's based on a whole bunch of questions and some simple measurements, and it doesn't, you don't need to be a rocket science to be able to do that. But it's based on kind of the best approach. And I think it has been applied. Maybe Deb knows better than me. If it has been applied to some buildings in Ottawa, I know the federal government did use it to look at some of their own assets, and that, that determines where you put the effort essentially in terms of mitigation, because often these architectural standards usually only apply to new buildings and new development. So it doesn't remove the existing problems. The existing problems require mitigation. And the other thing is, as Sophie said, most of the problems are with our houses that are built in natural areas, or have forests or bird feeders are nearby, or low rises. Those are the problems, and architectural standards usually don't address them. So there's a real important need for grassroots education, sort of at the neighborhood association level, to get people doing things. I think that's sort of, we need to shift the conversation at some point to what can the neighborhoods do and what can local people do.
Thanks, both. That's very helpful. Um, Penny was asking, did you contact, Sophie, municipal staff only or bird teams directly? How can we know if our staff were contacted and whether they responded?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Penny, I noticed in your bio it says Bird Friendly Lions Bay. And I was going to mention it's unfortunate we didn't have the chance to contact all of our bird friendly cities because they weren't on the sampling list. So I did want to say for all the bird friendly cities we managed to talk with, I think there was 14 total. I reached out to the bird friendly teams directly because they're the ones who often have the most up-to-date information or have recently submitted our certification or recertification to Nature Canada. So I would have reached out for the bird friendly cities to the bird team directly, and they would let me know, if they had the capacity to help with the questionnaire or if they suggest I reach out to a municipal official. But yeah, I would have contacted the bird teams directly, and unfortunately Lions Bay wasn't on the list of urban centers this time around, but maybe if the survey gets extended in the future, we'd be able to sample all of the bird-friendly cities. So that was a great question.
Thanks very much for the question, Penny. John McFall asks, how do we learn the individual urban center rankings?
Yeah, great question. That was kind of something I didn't necessarily present on this time around, and that's just because this study recently just wrapped up. So kind of the survey dissemination, how we're going to do that is still being figured out currently at ECCC Nature Canada. So I'm sure we'll have some kind of answer to that shortly, but right now it literally just finished. So we're still just trying to figure out how we're going to disseminate that and whether, with regards to privacy, whether each municipality will get their own ranking and the overall ecozone ranking, or if we'll be sharing all the municipalities. That's still kind of being decided right now.
Great, thanks, Sophie. I'm not sure if this came up in your responses to the previous question, but I just going to mention Deb's responses on the question of building standards. She says that Safe Wings Ottawa and FLAP have both provided advice to building manager to retrofit using this method. So yeah, retrofits happening. And Deb also mentions that BSC at U Ottawa, um, BSC again, bird safe. I forget.
Bird
I'm
Safe
drawing a blank on
Campus
the
at
acronym.
Bird Safe
Bird safe
Campus at
campus.
U Ottawa, and there are a number of Bird Safe campuses across the country. There's a Bird Safe Campus Guelph. So engaging. My point is engaging uh, students to do that kind of assessment on campus. It's a small municipality. It's a small city, a university. So I had a team who first assessed the buildings, went to the Office of Sustainability, and then recommended the worst buildings have treatments done on them, and then they did the murals. So it was a 3-semester project, and one, it was very useful to the university. Two, it had 15 students out there being ambassadors for window collisions. So it's a really great model, and I can share with people if they want to know how to do that locally.
Great, thanks, Deb. John also asked, can you share whether our city was contacted and the response received and/or rating? I think that you might have addressed that, Sophie, but anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, so as I said, that's still we're still in the process. We're having a meeting with ECCC kind of towards the end of the month to talk about data dissemination and what and how we can share. So I think that's just something that's still ongoing, but most of it is public information. Things like, bylaws you can find on their website, bird-friendly policies, you can see the lack thereof usually in the building design guidelines. So I'm sure there won't be an impediment to sharing that data, but as of right now, we're still kind of in that process.
Great, thanks. I see that Monica's iPhone asks, are there cat collars that can protect birds?
Yeah, I'm not a super big expert on that topic. I don't know if Ted or Deborah has any thoughts on that.
Sure. I can talk to briefly. Yeah, there's certainly been studies on different types of cat collars. Those the bird begone collars, I think, are the most popular one that some stores sell. The big issue I don't think there's just a lot of cat owners that want to put them on their cats. The other thing is that the issue with cats is if they're outdoors. And when we dealt with this issue, we tried to kind of turn the narrative around that it's really, if it's an own cat, it's in your cat's interest not to be roaming around just because it's exposed to disease, because it's exposed to vehicle collisions and being killed that way or being injured. And in fact, the lives are much shorter. So whether it has a collar on or not, it doesn't really change that. It does make a difference, as a bell makes a very small difference. You think the bell made a bigger difference, but not much of a difference. So we like to have the discussion around it's really in the best interest of the cat to have a safe, interesting home environment. And bylaws. The other issue around with cats, of course, is there's a fairly significant percentage of cats that don't have owners, and it's an entirely different. The bylaw doesn't apply to them. So, like all of these issues, they're way more complicated than we than we think, and the solutions are very complicated as well. So that was the wonderful thing about this survey, and working with Sophie is it really did try to drill down into the complexity, because initially it was just going to be, oh, is our bylaw or not? But that doesn't really tell you anything. And I think we've been able to actually get a fairly accurate portrait of what's going on across the country.
I suppose. I'm not seeing any additional questions in the chat or hands up. I wonder if I might just ask one or two, Sophie. I'm just wondering if you can speak to ECCC's motivation in commissioning this project in the first place. What do they want out of it, if you're allowed to say?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was more so involved in the kind of the planning and the data collection, less in terms of the big picture talks. So I don't know if I want to throw this over to Ted, if he maybe has a kind of more in-depth idea.
Sure, I can tell you. Well, the short the short story is that Canada has responsibility for migratory birds through the oldest nature law in the country, called the Migratory Bird Convention Act, which was passed in 1917. So we celebrated the centennial of that, almost 10 years ago. So the law has changed over time, but essentially that means that Canada needs to do things that, when I say Canada, I mean I'm talking about the federal government, but I also mean us collectively. We do need to do things to protect our bird populations. We are also signatories to the Convention on Biological Diversity, where we commit to not losing biological diversity in the country. Those charts, those graphs that you showed at the start paint a different story. So the government therefore has an obligation to try to address the issue, to protect and maintain healthy bird populations. We know birds contribute lots of ecological services to keeping nature healthy, to keeping trees healthy so they can absorb carbon and etc. And they like to work in partnership. Government bureaucracy is this big, awkward, slow-moving thing. So this is where having partner organizations doing stuff like this is much easier. We can do it much more efficiently. And so they want to get some data to inform the work that they're doing. And they also fund the Bird Friendly City program. So one of the things they want to know is that actually working? Is it making a difference? So obviously we're trying to understand all of those things, but I guess the short answer, it's their mandate to do this. It's a very complicated question. We know that human associated actions are connected to a lot of bird mortality, own cats and windows being part of it. And we also know that there are actual things that we can do to reduce that. So we want to address that through the Bird Friendly City program. We want to address that in municipalities, whether one way or another. So that's the question. Get a baseline so that we can understand if our efforts are actually making a difference. That's the motivation.
Great. Thanks very much, Ted. I see a new question in the chat, but Deb, was this to the same point? I see your hand up as well. To the same point? Go ahead. Are you having
Unmuting.
trouble?
Yeah. So no, it's just, is the survey showing is there a survey showing what birds are more affected, migratory or urban birds, sort of resident birds or migratory birds? And that there have been several surveys that have been one most recently, I would say it's Simon Fraser University, by Vanessa Hum, showed which bird type. And so you'd have to then go in and like the songbirds, and the list of birds, but that's been duplicated several times in BC. So if any, I don't have the name of it exactly and know the exact stats, but I do know that the varied thrush was the top bird. So whether that was, and I think that is a migratory bird in and certainly window collisions increase during migration. So I can say that, and I believe Rachel Buxton at Carleton University also may be doing some research on this. So yeah. Yes, and also, yeah, Willow, who's on the call, may be able to, from SafeWings, may be able to comment on this as well, because SafeWings does publish a list of the birds that are victims of window collisions, but I don't know, Willow, if you know any specific studies that have been done on migratory versus resident birds. Is she still there? She may not still be on the call. or Sue Phillips, who's also here from
Yeah, I can just anecdotally comment that, as you said, Deb, certainly collisions increased dramatically during migration. Having said that, we don't patrol in the winter, but certainly spring and fall are the busiest season, and obviously we get many more migratory birds than we do,
Here, let me do
say,
it.
sparrows, starlings, that sort of thing. So
Use the cursor.
So maybe a topic for another webinar.
And then you have to pull it down so they can see you and put your hand up. I don't know how you down.
Ted's
Go
got a
ahead.
hand up.
Who's it? Richard, I think you're trying to ask a question. Go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering, did the survey ever take into consideration what the hunting has done to bird populations? Like there's like I know Ducks Unlimited is really out there and in the forefront of creating wetlands and whatnot, and which is fine. But at the same time, we just got legislation where people can go out and hunt sandhill cranes. And sandhill cranes have just started coming back into their own in southern Ontario. Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to shoot them. Was any of this, was hunting ever a part of the survey, or was it just cities?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Thanks for the question, Richard. That's a really important point. For this survey, it was specifically just looking at like cities, so urban center problems, and hunting, I think, is more so addressed under not municipal legislation. I don't think there's a whole lot the municipalities can necessarily do, but that would be a great topic for further study. That's maybe like expanding beyond the municipal scope.
Remind me, continue with this. Municipalities do have some part and say in it, because our municipality, you could only hunt Monday to Saturday. Now the municipality has decided that we're going to hunt 7 days a week. So it isn't just a federal or provincial thing. I think the municipalities could have a say in this too.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. That's a good point. But yeah, for this survey, we only focused on birds, bird window collisions, and cats. Unfortunately, there's many other things we probably could have included, but just for the sake of time and efficiency and focusing on a few things, those are the two topics. But that's a good point.
Thanks, Richard. I see two more questions in the chat. Why don't we make those the last two questions and then wrap things up? So second last question was from Louis. According to the survey, what is the threshold for a bird-friendly city? 2.5, 3? Question.
Yeah, totally. So I guess that was kind of related to that last little graph I showed about the bird-friendly cities compared to the non-bird-friendly cities. Based on the bird-friendly cities we sampled in the survey, which I believe I mentioned was 14, the average for that was approximately a 2.5. Now, again, each individual bird-friendly city had a varying rating. Like some had 3.5, some had 2.5, some had 3. Like it really depended on the city and what measures they'd put in place to safeguard bird security. But the average we did see was approximately 2.5 for these 14 ones we sampled.
Great. Thanks, Sophie. And then final question here. Any information on the implementation of the bird strategy and bird safe design guidelines in Ottawa? I'm not sure, Sophie, if you know that. If not, maybe we can bump it to Deb, or I don't know if
Yeah,
Ted knows anything.
that sounds good.
Deb? Ted?
Yeah, I just put my email in the chat, but in general, they are being implemented for new builds by at the planning stage, and new builds of buildings, multiple dwelling buildings that are 3 stories high or higher. And the specifics are in the bird safe guidelines page. It's probably, I don't know, Linda, if you're from City of Ottawa, but if you want more specific information, I can give that to you. Just anecdotally, the city planners are discussing it. We are seeing more bird friendly buildings going up. I mean, we had 52 cranes in the city a year ago, and I'd say maybe 5% of those buildings actually were implemented with bird safe glazing. So we're starting to see it happen. Not nearly what we'd like to see, and they're not mandatory, they're guidelines. But the city staff are good at recommending, and in fact they use Toronto's standards when they're advising developers, so they don't just stick to what we've had written. So we've got some good work happening at the city. Just unfortunately, I think we need to educate the developers more. Oh, we got one new question. Oh, is that a response, Ted? Yeah, there we go.
I just put in the link to our Bird Friendly City program. Some people are asking about what it means to be a bird friendly city. And so if you want to see the application form, the criteria, get a better sense of how they're evaluated, there's different levels and so on, then I encourage you to visit that website.
Great. Thanks for putting that in the chat.
Okay, so why don't we call it a wrap at this point? Thanks so much, everyone, for being here, for your engagement, for your great questions. Thank you very much, Sophie, for just an excellent presentation, and Ted for some backup, and Deb for some backup. Really appreciate everyone's contributions to this, and looking forward to hearing more as the project hopefully goes further. With that, I'll wish everyone an excellent evening. Thanks again for coming.
And thank you, William, so much for organizing all of this.
Yes, thank you, William. It was great to be here.
Our pleasure.